Greetings, welcome to Facts About Everything. I'm your host James Egan, and today on Bond Month, we'll be looking at the 1995 film Goldeneye. This film came out 6 years after License to Kill. This is the biggest gap between two Bond films. The tagline was, "When the world is the target and the threat is real, you can still depend on one man." The theme song was sung by Tina Turner. The theme song was written by Bono. It was unclear whether Dalton would return to the franchise for several years. He officially resigned from the series on April 11th, 1994. The producers immediately sought out a replacement. Pierce Brosnan starred in a show called Remington Steele during the 1980s when he was offered the role of James Bond for the film The Living Daylights. The show was about to be cancelled, so he saw it as a perfect opportunity to boost his career. However, he got so much attention as the next James Bond that the ratings of Remington Steele skyrocketed. As a result, the series was picked up for another season and he was contracted to appear in it, which meant that he was prevented from taking the role of Bond. Sadly, the show was cancelled shortly after and the role of Bond went to Timothy Dalton. Goldeneye is the name of Ian Fleming's villa where he wrote the Bond novels. Bond kills 47 people in this film, which is more than any other in the series at the time. The tank scene took 6 weeks to shoot. Minnie Driver cameos as Valentine's dreadful singer. The cradle scene where Trevelyan fights Bond was inspired by the train fight in From Russia with Love. Pierce Brosnan received a free car with his salary with all Bond films that he starred in. Brosnan is from Louth in Ireland. Brosnan was only 164 pounds in this film, making him the lightest actor to play Bond. Brosnan is the only actor not to portray Bond in a film based on any of the Ian Fleming novels. Famke Janssen plays the henchwoman Xena Onatopp. She broke a rib during her sauna fight scene. Bond doesn't smoke in this film because the director despises cigarettes. Fans and critics were extremely negative just before this film came out. There were talks about retiring the franchise and allow it to be an icon of the past. In early developments, there were talks about making Bond a woman. At one point, the producers wanted to set the film in the 1960s. The very first scene shot was between Robbie Coltrane's character Valentine and Bond. Brosnan was paid $4 million for the role. The prologue featured the longest bungee jump in movie history at the time. The drop was 722 feet. Several story elements had to be changed since the plot was almost identical to True Lies, which was only released the previous year. In the original script, Onatopp kills her victims with her hands, not her thighs. Originally, Trevelyan was called Augustus and he was meant to be Bond's mentor. This is the first Bond film to be made after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. Alan Rickman and Anthony Hopkins were considered for the main villain. Trevelyan is based on the Batman villain, Two-Face. He is a villain with a facial scar who used to be allies with the hero. Trevelyan goes with the name Janus, who was the two-faced Roman god. This is the first Bond film to use computer-generated images. This was the first Bond film to be released on DVD. Trevelyan's fortress, the Cradle, is the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico. It also appeared in the 1997 film Contact. When Bond is drinking alcohol, Brosnan is actually drinking iced water. This is the first film in the series where Judi Dench plays the role of M. It is also the first time the role was played by a woman. When M drinks alcohol, Dench was actually drinking apple juice. This is the first film where Moneypenny is played by Samantha Bond. She plays a character in the following 3 films. The film is directed by Martin Campbell. He has a reputation for rebooting series, since the Bond series was on a downward spiral until he made this film. When the series went into a slump again several years later, he rebooted it once more with Casino Royale, although he couldn't make Green Lantern work. Like, what the hell was that? M's real name is Barbara Maudsley. The film was nominated for 2 BAFTAs. A Goldeneye was a code name for a contingency plan that the Allies created in case the Nazis invaded Spain. The plan was concocted by Ian Fleming while he was an SIS agent. This is the last Bond film that the producer Albert R. Broccoli saw before he passed away on June 27, 1996. Joe Don Baker plays Jack Wade. Pierce Brosnan and Baker also worked on Mars Attacks. This is the first Bond film where Albert R. Broccoli's daughter Barbara was a main producer. She has been a producer on every Bond film since. Pierce Brosnan's contract stated that he was not allowed to wear a tuxedo in any non-Bond film while he was still playing James Bond. Hugh Grant was considered for the lead role. The film has more miniatures and models than any other Bond film of the time. Trevelyan's locomotive was nicknamed Darth Train by the crew since its front looks like Darth Vader's mask. Brosnan is the last Bond actor that was cast by Albert R. Broccoli. Pierce Brosnan and George Lazenby are the only actors to portray Bond that were born outside outside of the UK. This is the first Bond film to be directed by someone who was not British. Brosnan found the cradle scenes very difficult since he has a fear of heights. Elizabeth Hurley and Elle Macpherson were considered for the Bond girl Natalia Simonova. When Zena Onatop is flying the Tiger helicopter, her character is actually played by a man. Alan Cumming plays Boris Grishenko. He is best known for playing Nightcrawler in X-Men 2. John Woo nearly directed the film. Woo is best known for directing Face Off and Mission Impossible 2. Roger Moore visited the set to see his son, who was part of the crew. When he was asked what he was doing there, he said Pierce Brosnan didn't work out, so he was going to replace him. This is the only Bond film starring Pierce Brosnan that wasn't released in the same year as the Bond parody, Austin Powers. There were 4 action scenes in the original script that did not appear in this film, but they showed up in future Bond films. Escaping from an underground nuclear explosion and avoiding buzzsaw helicopters is in The World Is Not Enough. The US government and MI6 teaming up to destroy a satellite ended up in Die Another Day, and the freefall sequence appeared in Quantum of Solace. The film cost $58 million. It made $352 million worldwide. In some countries, the film was called The Eye of Fire. And finally, the trailer spoiled the identity of the villain. People complain a lot recently that trailers are spoiling too much. That's always been a problem, guys. It's not a recent thing. They've always done that. By the way, did you know Christian Bale was offered the role of James Bond, but he turned it down because he already played a serial killer? If you want to know more about that, check out my Christian Bale video. Special thanks to these fine people for all their help. Be sure to subscribe to Facts About Everything. Follow me on Twitter for updates on upcoming videos. Check out my Facebook page to let me know what subjects you want me to talk about in the future. Thanks for watching. See you again.